to get started on these paint value scales, we first need to draw out the boxes. Grab something with a stiff edge, so a folded piece of paper, a ruler, junk mail, doesn't matter. Start by drawing me a row of 6 boxes. You can just eyeball it. I don't need to measure it out, but try to make them even if you can. Once you have these 2 rows of 6 boxes each, go ahead and make me one long box that's the same length but a little bit taller. No division lines in it, it's just one long box. This first set up here is going to be our tints. To make tints of paint, we're going to take a lot of white and we're going to add just a little bit of a color. This next row is going to be our shades. To make our shades, we'll have a big old blob of the color, and we'll add just a little tiny blob of black. Down here, we're going to blend from our darkest value to our lightest value of this color. I'm going to start on this palette paper I have up here. I mix paint on magazines, junk mail, old newspapers, it doesn't matter. I'm just using this white palette paper I have so that you guys can see me mixing my colors. So I'm going to start with this color red. Give my palette some black paint. And of course we need a lot of white. Every time we paint, we also need water and a paper towel to keep our brush dry every time we clean it. Anytime my brush is wet, I'm going to make sure I squeeze it off. It needs to be dry. We're not watercoloring. For our tints, I'm going to start with my pure color in this first box. When you paint, I want you to keep it inside the line. So notice I use the tip of the brush at the edge of the line and I pull, and then I change direction and I pull the other way. I can also use the corner or side of the brush if I pay attention to the line as I'm working down here. It's very important that we stay inside the boxes. Just like with drawing, we need to be able to control our medium. So when we move on to maybe painting a cube, we're able to make it look like a cube by staying inside the lines. Now, for the tints, you got to start at the other end now, which is a little tricky for people. We're going to go from red to the lightest color red we can possibly make. Now, what's the lightest color red? It's like pink. I'm going to clean off my brush. Red is a very strong color. Clean it off. White is wimpy. If I went and I just added some white to this red puddle, nothing would happen. I'd be mixing forever and I'd be wasting a lot of paint. So instead what I do, I'm going to take a smudge of the white and put it here. I'm going to take a pinprick of red. Can you see how little red I have on my brush? I'm going to mix it into that puddle of white. So remember this, a lot of white with a little bit of color. I'm going to mix that in and I'm going to make the palest white I can the palest pink I can possibly make. Once I've mixed that with my brush, and paint it in the box. Next, I need to make it a little bit more red. Remember, this is a value scale from red to its lightest value, its lightest tint. I'm gonna take a little bit more red on my brush. Again, it's not much more than a pinprick. I can mix it into this same puddle. Take a little bit more, I want it to be a little stronger than that. Paint it in the next box. I'm going to continue adding my little pinprick of red until I get all the way back to the pure red color at the end of this tinted value scale. Okay, that value scale is finished. Notice that each one is just slightly paler than the one before. That's how we make a scale. My brush has red and white paint on it. I must clean this brush off, so I'm dipping it in my water, and then I'm going to take my paper towel and I'm going to squeeze it dry. We never want, when we're making a value scale, we never want black and white to mix together. Black and white make gray. We're not looking for gray. Gray is not a tint and gray is not a shade. Gray is a tone, it's in between. To start our next value scale, we're going to start with our red again. For my shades, I'm going to go ahead, remember, lots of color and only a little bit of black. So I'm going to take my red puddle, I'm going to scoop up some red and I'll put it over here. Let me adjust so I can make sure you can see that. So I've taken a bunch of red and I've put it over here. I don't want to waste that entire red puddle, so I've put my own red puddle over here for shading. Now I'm going to start with a pin prick of black. Just a little bit of black. We can always add more to this puddle if I decide it doesn't make enough of a difference. I just want to see my red get a little bit darker for my first shade. Now this time I'm going to work this direction because I'm going from red to the darkest shade I can make. So I'll check that red before I keep moving. That looks a little bit darker. I have to make sure that I can come up with 5 shades of this pure red. And again, I'm just going to continue adding a little pinprick to my puddle and making a new shade as I fill in each box on this value scale. Time to clean off my brush again. Now notice I finished each color, each box is slightly darker than the one before it. I got to the darkest shade of red I could possibly make without it turning completely black. We have names for these colors. When we add white to red, we call it pink. When we add black to red, we call it maroon. It's time to start our blended value scale. The blended value scale is different. We're not going to work on the palette now. We're going to work on the value scale itself to mix our colors. We want to go from the lightest value of red that we can make to the darkest. But remember, we don't want black and white to mix because we'll end up with gray. Paint does not blend if it dries. So for the blended value scale, you have to work quickly while still controlling the paint. We're going to start with pure red right in the middle, making sure we keep clean edges. And then I'm going to grab that white paint and I'm going to mix right on the paper. Now remember, red is strong. It's going to turn that hot pink really fast. Use the tip of your brush to have them mix together. Don't forget, while you're working along here, you've also got to clean up your edges so that this has a nice, smooth, clean line. Now, if it starts to dry, that's not good. So we need to keep adding paint to keep this wet. It won't mix as soon as it dries. And I'm going to scoop up some white paint, mix it right on the page. Now, if I keep going like this, we've already learned red is really strong and white is really wimpy. If I keep going like this, I'm never going to get to this same light pink at this end. I'm going to take a second and clean off my brush. There's too much red mixed into the bristles. I'm going to clean it. Always squeeze it dry. I'm going to grab that white, put some pure white right on the end of this end of the value scale, and I'll start mixing again now. And you'll pick up just a little bit of red if your paint is still wet, and that is enough that it will start mixing with that white and turn it pink without going really heavy dark pink, because we need to make sure we have every value. Clean up any streaks you have in there so it looks as smooth as possible. I'm done with the tinted end of this blended value scale, but I need to get to the shaded end too. I'm going to go back to the middle. I need that paint to be wet, because if I added black right now, nothing would happen. I would just have a big black streak. Wash the brush. Black and white can never get together in this assignment. Squeeze that brush dry and get that red paint wet again. So I'm going to put fresh red paint in the middle of this value scale. I'm going to put a lot of red paint because I need the red to survive that strong black paint that's about to mix in there with it. So I'll put a lot of red paint on this time. I'm going to grab my pinprick of black and mix it right on the paper. Not on my palette, but right on the paper. This is how we blend. Tip of the brush as if you're trying to barely tickle it. And smear that black and red together. Keep those edges clean. I'm getting a little messy here. I'm going to clean my brush just with my towel for a second. I want to make sure that black streak doesn't show in the end, so I cleaned off some of the black that was on my brush just with my paper towel, and I'm going to tidy up. Now back to it. I'm going to add some red because I'm running out. It's starting to get dry here on me, so I'm going to add some more red right to the page. And then I'm going to grab my black and mix it right in there. Just like our value scales that we have done in pencil, we want this to look like a smooth gradation from the pure color to the end. The whole thing should be one smooth gradation. I think that could use a little more black at the end to make sure it looks like the darkest end of the value scale. I'm trying to make it look like that box right there. And check that it looks pretty blended before we can say we're done.